let's start with the school shooting, because not school. This time it's not a school. It's a bowling alley in a bar and grill. I don't have any answers for Zoe. I mean, what she said is exactly right. This shouldn't happen. But in this guy's case, there were red flags. That's how I'm going to put it. There were red flags. Mm-hmm. He had been in a mental health facility recently. He had made threats to carry out a shooting, as we said in the intro, and he reported hearing voices. He had been committed to a mental health facility for 2 weeks over the summer, but was released. Why? What they concluded, why they thought that he would be okay to walk amongst us, I don't know. It's part of, I'm sure, what's going to be the investigation. But in my view, and I've been saying this, after a lot of these shootings, we're very quick to release people like this from these mental health facilities. We don't have the inclination or the funding to keep them or the resources. And in most instances, somebody like this hasn't even been through the system. They just go untreated with mental health issues that a parent would notice or a teacher might notice, but very little is done to stop it. And I realize, again, back to the 330 million, and it's a free country. But what's going to happen now is, look at that gun. That's a big gun. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to stop the next killer from getting a gun, no matter what we do. And we wind up shrugging our shoulders and saying, and then we move on to the next story. Kmele, what do you think of it?
Well, Megyn, I have some personal experience with a situation, not exactly like this, but that could have been like this. A close family member of mine who was suffering from some pretty severe mental issues, who managed to get a hold of a gun, and having been behaving erratically for some period of time before that, was perpetrating, unbeknownst to most of our family, unbeknownst to anyone in our family, really, perpetrating a string of shootings. And there were rumors and some discussion amongst family members as to whether or not he might have been involved. And there is, I think, a rather profound degree of people having an ability to not want to believe that someone in their family might be in a position where they are a threat to other people, a danger to themselves, where you have to ask questions, well, do they even have a handgun? I mean, they're making dangerous threats, they're behaving in violent ways, or could they really do something that dastardly? Yeah, they probably could. And the urgent need for us to do something about our national mental health crisis, but our own inability in many of our own families to actually deal with family members who we know who are in severe distress, who might be a danger to others. I urge you to speak up if you see something happening that seems a bit unusual. I think so often, as you mentioned, Megyn, we tend to lurch towards the gun debate. And really, it's people who are interested in trying to do something impractical, like confiscate all the guns, who spend most of their time in the wake of a tragedy like this talking about confiscating guns. The really difficult work, quite frankly, and I think the thing that could actually have a practical impact on the likelihood of these things happening, is families and communities having really sober conversations about what we do for people who are in distress, who are in our midst, who could, in fact, end up becoming a mass shooter or doing something else dramatically harmful to lots of other people. There is something that has to be done, but there is no shortcuts there. I think it requires a lot of hard work and sober, serious conversations in moments like these, as opposed to the kind of political mud wrestling that takes place with people preening and essentially imagining that they could do something impossible to eradicate this sort of problem forever. But I think it's much better to focus on the difficult but practical things that we need to do here.
Well, that's an extraordinary story, Kmele. I agree with every word you said. And I mean, we could spend more time on the gun debate. There are over 400 million guns in America. They're not going away. In no world are the semi-automatic guns ever going away, and they can do as much damage as the AR-15s. It's like, it's pointless to spend time on the gun debate. They're not going away in no world. So we do have to spend time on the mental health problem. And I'll tell you, Moynihan, I've said this before after other shootings that involve schools, but it could be any mass shooting. I really firmly believe what we need is a mental health facility to which a loving parent would send her son. We need a facility that is jail-like. It's a secure facility, but it is one to which a loving family member would feel comfortable committing his or her son, daughter, uncle, cousin, and one in which civil liberties are going to have to be bent a bit. They're going to have to be protected, but they can't be the concern number one. Mine and yours and our kids, those civil liberties are the ones that are going to have to matter, not those of the guy who's hearing voices and is threatening to shoot places up and was just on a mental health hold inside a facility over the summer. That guy's going to lose a little. But we could set up a panel where we had disciplined doctors who review this person's mental health history and decide for the rest of us whether this person's a threat or a danger to society or not. And we could continue extending the holds. Something needs to change. It's not a gun grab. Something needs to change in the way we approach people we know have mental health issues. And of course, yes, their access to guns.
I mean, you're right on one thing in particular when you talk about mental health professionals. I did a story maybe 4 or 5 years ago when a red flag law was about to be passed in Washington state. And I talked to the people who objected to this. And they were civil libertarians. A lot of people like the ACLU was not on board with this, and not the type of group you would suspect is going to be like, well, let people have access to guns. The issue is that, a judge was the person that was supposed to be qualified to determine whether somebody was mentally fit to exercise a constitutional right. That is a hard position to put a judge in. It was also who gets to bring somebody before a court. Can it be, a girlfriend or an ex or a boyfriend, whoever, who is angry about something and wants to, bring them in front of a court to kind of take their guns away for whatever reason? So there has to be all those checks in it. Into what Kmele just said, I just wanted to add something. Is that when that was actually happening in Kmele's life, Kmele and I talked about it. So while it was ongoing, and when Kmele says it's a difficult thing to do, I had that conversation with him. And I remember how difficult that process was. Like, this could be somebody in my family. What do I do? There's no easy path here. And, I'll say one final thing about this is, I have a lot of European friends who say, just do something. You have to do something. And there's ups and downs, goods and bads about the system that we have. I think it's mostly good that, when you tweet something in the UK, you can go to jail because there's no free speech rights. The Constitution is a pretty, thankfully, rigid document that doesn't allow somebody to separate somebody from a constitutional right on a hunch. So it puts us in very difficult situations like this. You're right, Megyn, also that, gun grabbing. I mean, there's more guns than there are people in this country. It's an impossibility. There was a liberal journalist who used to work for the New York Times who wrote a really interesting book that I recommend your listeners pick up called Living with Guns. He's a liberal New York guy. I don't think he's a gun owner, but he said, look, we have to live with this and figure out how to live with it and what is the most practical thing. And for me, one of the things that has made me drift away over time from a rigidity in my libertarianism is going to San Francisco. And the connection there is that when you walk around San Francisco, you see this is the result of what libertarians loved in the past, which was deinstitutionalization. You cannot force a person who has their own sovereign rights to be on the street if they don't want to. Wrong. Because that person is abridging the rights of everybody else in their society. And so that was the first kind of moment where I was like, I think maybe libertarians on this are off. In that kind of balance between taking away somebody's rights or institutionalizing them for public safety is something that I do not in any way pretend is an easy thing to ascertain or to figure out the correct balance.
Yes, I know it's not going to be easy because I know, there are a lot of gun owners out there who, your point about can the girlfriend do it? They're worried, some upset ex is going to somehow get them committed or get their gun taken away. That can't happen either. It has to be set up such that there are multi layers before somebody would get committed or would have the red flag put on such that they can't have the access. But we need to do it. I'm sick of these mass murders where we just have the same dumbass debates every time. Literally nothing changes. And even if we banned all these guns, and of course you're not supposed to have access to a gun if you have the mental health history of this guy anyway. But guess what? They figure out how to get it. Of course they do. It's not hard to get a gun. What I'm thinking in response to this, and by the way, welcome Matt. Matt's feed is up now. What I'm thinking in response to this horrific shooting, you're at the bowling alley, for God's sake. You're at a bar and grill with your family. It's a youth night. Or we'll get to the Cooper Union college students is, I've said this before, I'm not like a big gun person, but in these moments, I want to call my friends Dana and Chris Lash who live in Texas, and they are huge Second Amendment people, and I want to spend the next year in training with them. I want the same arsenal they have in their home. I want to be as comfortable with the guns. I mean, they got guns everywhere. I would love to see somebody try to, not really, but invade their home. That guy would get it right where he deserves it. Not really, please don't do that. But I'm just saying, in these instances, those of us who don't walk around with guns all the time are feeling like we need them. I mean, I'm talking to Jewish families right now who I know who are, for the first time in their lives, getting guns. You know, there was an incident in LA just 2 days ago where somebody invaded somebody's house with a knife trying to attack the family because they were Jewish, right? That's probably going to be elevated to President Biden's next speech, I'm sure, because it was a Jewish family. Yeah, right, I'll wait. Anyway, I really do think in these instances, the answer to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun if we're not going to start institutionalizing these people. Matt Welch, what do you think?
Yeah, as you say, every single time this happens, there's this scramble that we all do internally and that everyone does externally of what's the magic button I can push to make this not happen. And there really isn't one in a country that has 350 to 400 million guns already there. You can't confiscate them. You have a Second Amendment right to individual firearms, and you have a country with a history of violence. We're just a little bit more violent country than most other places. The New England and that weird part of the country up north and to the east that Moynihan is from is a pretty heavily armed and pretty gun-free, meaning like you're free to have guns type of place. It's sort of like Canada in that regard. There's a lot of guns and there isn't a lot of restrictions. So
well, how about the South?
I mean, there's a lot of places with a lot of guns, and people, gun violence is oftentimes more concentrated in places where there are the heaviest gun restrictions, in places like Chicago and Washington, D.C., New York City, to some degree, although that's gone down over the years. There isn't a magic button. We have to respect rights, and we have to acknowledge that something is deeply broken, either just broadly in mental health or in the nexus between where people have obvious mental health problems and proximity to guns. It's infuriating and sad making. It's one of the craziest things about this is you wonder, in the wake of so much other news happening right now, are people going to be talking about this 2 days from now? I'm not so sure.